for the second time. So underneath district court, you should have judges that does have a jury. Again, it's one of the few that has a jury. And then it has original jurisdiction. The reason it only has original jurisdiction, guys, is because it's one of the lowest courts at the federal level, so you can't appeal to the district court. Okay? As a matter of fact, roughly 90% of federal court cases start within the district courts. Y'all got me? So, as far as the court numbers and judges go, just go ahead and jot those numbers down. I don't think I asked you, just put down that there's 94 district courts located across the United States. And within them, you got roughly 632 judges. Okay? So obviously that's a big court. Now, over here in Part C, this is the part that's important. The types of cases that it deals with is what I want you to know. Okay? Put a star, whatever you got to do there. Okay? So, the district court deals with civil and criminal cases involving federal law. I just told you that the vast majority of federal court cases start within the district. So obviously they have the jurisdiction to deal with any type of case, civil or criminal. I would also like for you to add to that is about 90% of federal cases begin here. Okay? 90% of federal cases normally begin within a district court. Okay? So far, so simple. Makes sense? Let me take this mask break. I'll take it outside.
Yes, please. That'd be great.
I'll just walk a circle. Come back in a little bit. Okay. I'll send them working on it. Good. All right, so is everybody good as far as the district goes? Simple enough? All right, let's move on to the Court of Appeals. Underneath the Court of Appeals, you'll notice that they have justices here. Okay? So there's a group of justices that work within the Court of Appeals, or they're referred to as justices. They do not have a jury, and obviously the only type of jurisdiction that we're dealing with here is appellate or appeals. They hear cases on review. Okay? As far as the courts and the judges are concerned, there's 12 federal U.S. Court of Appeals around the United States, and we have 179 justices, judges, whatever you prefer to call them, working in them. Okay? And then common sense. We can mark out this part. Simply put down that they hear appeals only from federal courts. So guys, if I break a state law, answer this question for me. If I break a state law, is it possible for me to end up in federal court?
Yes.
Technically, yes. Only if they wanted to hear it. Y'all with me? But could I appeal it to the federal court?
Yes.
No. States deal with state laws. Federal courts deal with federal laws. Y'all got me? So, appeals only from federal courts. That is the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals is very easy. They don't ever start anything there. They just try to simply end it. Okay? All right. And then we come to the Supreme Court. Okay? Now, this one has a lot to do, obviously. It's the highest court in the land. Okay? So, we're going to add a lot to this. So, with this one, justices. Does anybody know how many justices make up the U.S. Supreme Court? You should. How many? It's literally written beside of it. 9. Is that what you said, Sydney? Oh. There are 9 federal justices. We just got the 9th one put in. President Trump put 3 justices on the Supreme Court. So there's 9 total. There is no jury. And then if you'll notice beside of it, I wrote down all jurisdictions. And here's what I mean by that. Can a court case start in the Supreme Court? Yes. So it has original. Can you appeal to the Supreme Court? Yes. So it has appellate. There's another type of jurisdiction that was in Section 1 that some of you guys will see later that's called exclusive. Exclusive jurisdiction simply means that only the federal government can deal with it. And then the other type that we talked about is concurrent. which means that the state and federal government can share jurisdiction in certain instances. Okay? So, it does have any type of jurisdiction it needs. It's the biggest court in the land, so obviously it has all the power it needs to do whatever it has to do. Okay? There's only one Supreme Court in the U.S. There are 9 Supreme Court justices. And then if you'll notice it says appeals from state and federal courts and a few types of cases with original jurisdiction. Now, when it says appeals from federal courts, that's common sense. It deals with federal law. When it comes to appeals from state courts, that's only if the U.S. Supreme Court wants to hear it, which is a very slim chance. Okay? So, for our purposes, put that down. Appeals from state and federal courts and a few types of cases with original jurisdiction. So basically, guys, are you ever going to really start a case in the Supreme Court? They have the ability to do it with original jurisdiction, but it doesn't happen. They always hear them on review most of the time. Okay? Any questions or concerns there? We good? All right. And then the next 2 inferior courts that we're dealing with. And again, all these courts that we're talking about are inferior to, except for which one? The Supreme Court, right? So, you got the Court of International Trade. Common sense will tell you that it deals with what all day? Trade from other countries, correct? Obviously, there's only one of them. There's 9 judges. Now, here's the kicker with this one that I want you to remember. If you notice, it doesn't say anything about criminal cases. International trade doesn't deal with criminal. They deal with civil cases. So only if there is a dispute about trade guidelines does the Court of International Trade pick it up. Okay? Very simple. And then the last one is a fairly large court. It says the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Now, if you'll notice, I hope some of you are sitting there thinking, well, why do you have a Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit when you already have a Court of Appeals? The reason that they have this one is to help the Court of Appeals hear cases, because the U.S. Court of Appeals gets overloaded on a constant basis. So they simply just created another type of appeals court that only deals with appeals that can help them out. There's only one of those. There's 12 judges. And then simply put, guys, it hears appeals in federal cases. They help the U.S. Court of Appeals out. They simply hear appeals from federal cases. Okay? Now, pretty simple stuff. I just need you to know the types of cases that each of those courts deal with. Does anybody have any questions about that? It's written right out there in front of you. We good there? All right, let's scroll down a little bit and deal with some of these questions. Then we'll take us a break, a mask break, whatever you want to call it. Number 6 and number 7 here. It says, on what basis is the United States divided into judicial districts? Now, here's where these numbers come into play, okay? If you'll notice at the top, you got 94 district courts, you've got 12 courts of appeals, and then obviously you only got 1 Supreme Court. So, obviously, these 94 district courts are spread out throughout the United States. Does anybody know the closest district court to us? Does anybody have a clue where it may be at? Yeah, the big. Where is the U.S. Where is the first U.S. district court closest to us located? There's actually 2, and they're about the same amount of distance away. I'm just curious if you guys know where they are. We have one in Roanoke. There's another one if you're going toward Tennessee in a town. Does anybody know where it's at? In Abington, yeah. So that's where the closest ones we have. Most of the cases of people that break a federal law here end up going to Abington, because for whatever reason it's closer mileage-wise than Roanoke. Okay? So, on what basis do we divide the U.S. into judicial districts? The answer to that is pretty simple. It says each state forms at least 1 federal district. So, put down, each state is a district. So that's 1. So, each state is a district. So, with that being said, does each state have a U.S. district court in it? Yes. Now, depending on the population of that state or the amount of people that are living there, they may have more than 1. Do you think we have more than 1 U.S. district court in Virginia? We do. Well, obviously we do. California has more than one U.S. District Court. Do you think somewhere like Montana or South Dakota or somewhere like that would have more than one U.S. District Court? No, because of the size of the population. Not a lot of people live there. Y'all got me? So, each state has one. And then beside of that, put down no matter the size or population. Every state has at least one U.S. District Court. And then this goes on to explain that the larger the amount of people living in a state there is, the more that it's divided down. So put down states with larger populations are further divided. So meaning the more people living in the state, the more district courts they're going to have. Common sense, guys. The more people living somewhere, the more likely there will be issues, the more likely more courts will be needed. Okay? So each state is its own federal district, and then depending on the population is how much, how many other district courts you get. All right? And then this part you don't have to write down, but I do like to acknowledge it. It says there is also district courts in the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. District of Columbia is obviously within the states, even though it's not considered a state. And then the Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so we do have a district court there. And then number 7, it says, when and why were the Court of Appeals created? This is a very simple answer. We're going to make it way shorter than what that says. It says it was created in 1891 to relieve the Supreme Court of such a burden of hearing appeals because the highest court's docket had become overwhelming. Simply put, we created the Court of Appeals to help the U.S. Supreme Court hear cases. The Supreme Court was overloaded, so we created it. And I say we, the Constitution or Congress created it to basically help out the Supreme Court. Okay? Now, does anybody have any questions as far as the inferior courts go? Does that make sense? We good there? All right, here's what we're going to do next. We're going to take our mask break, as they like to call it.